This is the In Tune interview, where we talk to composers about the music they compose. And this week in the Make Believe OCR podcasting studio, we have two very, very special guests, in fact. We're in tune with the Super Marcato Bros, Will and Karl. Hey guys, welcome.
Howdy.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, well, thank you for coming here. And Bryan's here as well. Hey, Bryan.
Hey.
We all made it.
Yes.
So we have known these guys for quite a while. They've appeared on a number of episodes on our podcast Train Station at 8. And, well, we thought we'd bring them back again to interview.
Yeah, they also run their own podcast.
That is super true. Speaking of which, how about you guys kind of introduce yourselves to those not familiar with you? I'll leave it to you to see who does the introducing.
Well, yeah, we're a video game music duo, brotherly duo. We have our own podcast called the Super Marcato Brothers, in which we share and discuss the best in video game music every week. In addition to that, we compose original game music, whether it be for independent games or these kind of various homage albums that we've kind of been known to do for the past few years. We've did Galaxy, Mega Man, Sonic, all kinds of stuff. So that's pretty much what the Super Marcato Brothers is all about.
Yeah, and we've known the Kellys for a while, like Stephen said. It's kind of interesting. We've never met in person because we live in, polar opposite ends of the country. But I feel like we know each other well enough now that if I saw you guys in person, it would be a hugging situation.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Good.
It's always good to know who the huggers are, so you can watch out.
Yeah. So you don't awkwardly say, it's like, is this a hug or is this not a hug?
High five, kind of moving
Maybe
a little
we
too
can
close.
test it next MagFest.
I hope so. But so yeah, we have brought you guys here to talk about a specific song from your catalog of mini songs. So could you let the listeners know what you've brought to us today?
Yeah, the track is called Soaring Through the Stars. It was written for, actually, it's sort of a sad story. The game never was released. It was going to be this really awesome 2D side-scroller in kind of an old-school arcadey style. And we were really excited about all the music and sound that we were creating, but the game project sort of fell through. So we ended up releasing all the music that we had composed on our website under an album title called Soaring Through the Stars, and it's subsequently...
So this is the titular title. Yeah, this track is the titular title, Stage 1. So this would have been a PC space shooter, if you will. So we had a lot of direction from the developer of the game of like kind of the musical tone he wanted, and then he gave us a little bit of freedom. So this was pretty much the first track we made for the project, and I would say both of our favorite track on the project, and probably one of our favorite tracks we've done so far as the Super Marcato Brothers.
That's very cool. It is kind of tragic that the game didn't come out, but it's so cool that you guys decided to release it anyway.
Right. It makes me wonder how many soundtracks have gone just lost between unreleased games.
I know.
I gotta say probably tons. At least from our little experience so far, definitely a lot.
That's a bummer. But when you say a space shooter, are we talking like shoot 'em up, like side?
Side-scrolling shoot 'em up. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, the music definitely has that kind of energy to it that I would expect from one of those games.
Yeah, I would consider it would probably be sort of like a Life Force or an R-type kind of game.
Gotcha. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, as I was listening to it, I could just imagine a bunch of bullets of multicolored variety flying like left to right or up and down or something.
Absolutely.
So I guess with that said, let's give the song a listen, and then we can dive into some questions about it.
That was Soaring Through the Stars, Stage 1, from the album Soaring Through the Stars and composed by the Super Marcato Bros. That is a rocking track. I gotta hand it to you guys. So I'm curious, what I always think of when I hear a track from you guys is, what were the roles? Like, how did you guys split up the
That's what's really exciting about this one.
This track is cool because it marks the first time we ever really kind of consciously divided the roles in what we thought was a unique way. And ever since this project, we have done this so many times and it's always been fairly successful. So for this project, early on, we had the idea of not only, what type of sounds we wanted and what type of, combinations of retro and modern and all that stuff. But for the roles, we were like, okay, Will is just such a melody man, and he's always just so conscious of melody and always wanting to come up with these very immediate and poppy melodies. And for me, I'm much more kind of rhythmic oriented and just kind of more about the groove. So we were like, why don't we just play to our strengths? So why doesn't, Karl, me, come up with the chord progressions and the groove and the bass line and all that stuff, and Will just writes the melody on top of it.
The cool thing about how this worked, though, is that we really kind of took that concept to as far as it could go. Because not only was I writing the melody and he was writing the chords, I was literally getting from him the completed track minus the melody. So I got drums, guitars, chords, and would be hearing it for the first time, and then I would have to write a melody to that fixed piece of music.
So does that make writing a melody harder or easier?
What's interesting
much harder.
It makes it a lot more difficult, because typically the way that I compose music, because like Karl said, I do really care about the melody. I tend to think melody before anything. So if I have like a little nugget for a melody, that will influence what the chord progression will be, what everything will be, the rhythmic structure, time signature, all that stuff. And so it was an interesting challenge to be given these completed things and to write melodies to them, but also to write melodies that felt organic and kind of poppy.
Well, I think what it led Will to do is come up with things he never would have come up with before. Like the melodies for this project, I don't think he ever would have written them if the chords that I established weren't there. So it was kind of meeting in the middle, because I was trying to come up with chords that I thought he would enjoy and that a cool melody would work over. And he was trying to obviously come up with a melody that I would enjoy and that he thought would fit the groove. So it was a really kind of meeting of the minds. But yeah, so for this track as an example, pretty much everything you hear, all the other kind of instruments other than the NES instrument was my doing in the first 10 seconds of the track. That was what Will heard. He heard all that stuff and he had to try to come up with that family tracker melody.
Like we said, we took it to its fullest extent. So not only did I write the melody and he wrote the chords, everything you hear with the chords and groove, he implemented himself, and everything with the melody that you hear, I implemented myself. So we wanted to combine, with the chords, you have real guitar, you have, not real drums, but more modern sounding drums, and you have a mixture of different chip sounds and FM sounds. But for the melody, I wanted to do it like authentic NES sounding. So I did it in Family Tracker, and we chose to just use the square because we thought that was one of the most classic sounds. So every track in the album sort of has that combination where the melody sounds like NES, but the chords and groove and everything are a various plethora of other sounds. But it was kind of fun because not only would we write the things separately, we actually kind of produced and sequenced them independently from one another. So just like how I first heard the chords when Karl would send me sort of that finished thing, the first time Karl would hear any bit of melody was when I would send him the finished Family Tracker file. So it was kind of fun where we were able to kind of write it together, but also have this sort of separation and be excited by each other's work.
Yeah. So you guys were trading ideas back and forth. Did you have a bunch of revisions in between or any big rejected concepts, or did it sort of just flow together?
Not often.
Surprisingly, no. Yeah, that's what's crazy is that I think one of the reasons why this method, at least for us, had been so successful and something we keep revisiting is because it was surprisingly easy. I would send Will, I don't think there was ever a time where I sent Will a groove or a chord idea and he said, oh, that just doesn't work, or vice versa. I don't think there was ever a melody that I didn't like.
First working on a main menu, we knew we wanted it to be incredibly simple. So just looks like hardly anything at all. And Karl sent me something that I had trouble writing a melody, and then he immediately sent me something else, and then we worked on that.
Yeah, on the album, there's an unused main menu song. Is that the one you're talking about?
That's an interesting story, because that was actually the first one we did, and the developer didn't really think it fit the tone he was looking for. So the actual main menu is our second attempt in order to appease
it's actually
him.
our third attempt, because the first attempt was what I was talking about. That's not on the album.
Oh,
that was
okay.
like there was
So that just
something
never
that
even
Karl
got finished.
sent that I think was a little too simple, that I couldn't put a melody on top of
It was just one note.
But it
One square
It
wave.
was
Yeah.
really fun
And
to work on, because the other thing is, when I would receive these things, I had to figure them out on the piano, because part of the thing that's distracting that would be impossible if you're just listening to the track, you know, it's really hard to kind of come up with a melody of that. So I'd kind of have to simplify it and figure out what are the chords that are happening here, be able to kind of get it under my fingers when playing it on the piano, and treat it as if I had come up with those chords and that I was writing a melody to it. And then also listening to the track and hearing like rhythmically what sort of beats aren't really being fulfilled. In the harmonic range, you know, what isn't being fulfilled musically that could fit in there without, you know, crunching against everything else and creating too much dissonance and stuff.
Right. It probably really helps that you know Karl's style so well, being able to write around it.
Yeah, that's the only reason why this worked, is because we had been doing this kind of thing for so many years, as far as, you know, we would share ideas, you know, like for the Sonic-esque albums I made, Will was the first person I ever showed the ideas to, and he would kind of give me his ideas. So we were always sharing kind of back and forth as a sounding board. But our initial intention, or our initial hope, was that once the finished song was there, no one would be able to tell that it was composed of these separate parts put together. It's just supposed to be one kind of full big experience. And I will say, hopefully that's what we achieved with this project.
With all of our music,
it just feels like one thing.
We like try to explore different avenues of collaboration. So in some projects, entire tracks will be done by different people. And in some projects, we'll do it where, you know, I write the A section and Karl writes the B section entirely. And so we wanted to make it so that everything we put out there we thought was good, but that you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell who did what and how the roles were divided, and that there wasn't really kind of a gap between where one person's ideas began.
Yeah, what's funny is that this is the song we're talking about today, and this is one of the easiest examples of saying who did what, who's responsible for what on the track.
I was about to say
It's
that
so
very
easy.
thing.
Yeah, everything that's not Family Tracker, everything that's not NES is me, and everything that's NES is Will. It's just such an easy
The thing that
split.
we're okay with is that, like on paper, it sounds like those roles are really uneven, because, you know, it seems like Karl is doing so much more. But the thing that we were okay with is that really the melody in some ways is the most important aspect of a song, because that's what people go singing. So I was okay with, you know, letting him take such a responsibility for all the other aspects, because I knew that I got complete control over what the melody was going to be. So even though it's sort of asymmetrical, it's still sort of, they each have an equal weight.
Well,
it feels
reminds
fair.
me of, like, you can have a karaoke version of a song, or you could have a song that's just the sung lyric, and they're kind of both complete in their own way.
Right.
Like, those are kind of two parts, 'cause the drum and the bass work so well together. They're kind of two halves of the same whole. So it does
That's an interesting parallel.
Yeah.
So something I was curious about, you guys mentioned, you know, the live guitar and then the Family Tracker on top of it. What inspired you to, like, merge those two elements before? Because it seems a lot of your other music is, like, purely Family Tracker stuff.
Sure. Well, I mean, some of that was conversations with the developer. I believe that he mentioned he wanted to have kind of this combination of, he wanted it to feel kind of classic and retro, but also to be modern too. He didn't want it to just be 8-bit. He didn't want it to just be all metal. He did give us some examples of a couple different metal soundtracks. For the life of me, I can't remember them now. It was a long time ago. But he did talk specifically about metal and rock. So I knew that, okay, at the very least, we have to have distorted guitar in this project. So that was also just really the only metal element.
It was just playing to what we were able to do. You know, I had recently learned how to use Family Tracker, so I knew that was something that I could, you know, put together. And if we wanted to combine something kind of unique that you had never heard before. So we wanted it to sound video gamey and retro, but like not of anything that you could point to.
Yeah, and part of the you know, the way that we made it sound our own is, as far as like the drum samples, those were all kind of created on our own, we would take a combination of a bunch of different drum sounds and kind of create our own snare sample and our own kick sample, and just have a really quirky combination of instruments. And obviously the guitar I recorded, because again, it's something that I can do. I can play guitar, so yeah, let's have that in here. And then using amp modeling software, that's how I got the distorted sound. And then the idea of having it just enough in the mix so that you can feel that it's there, but it's actually pretty quiet. The guitar, it's actually kind of hard to really distinguish it, but if you muted that channel, you'd be like, wow, where is everything? So it is very important, but it's kind of something that you just kind of subtly feel in the mix.
And speaking of that guitar, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen a lot of tracks from you guys that use electric guitar. I was kind of surprised that it popped up. Is
That's
it
true.
something you guys are not used to working with, or do you just not happen to release music like that?
I think honestly, for whatever reason, just genre, just the types of projects we do, it isn't really called for that much. This was one where it definitely was called for, and that's why we went with it and had a great time with it. We have used it every now and then in another project
we did for a game that actually is released on Android. It's called Pocket Defender. It's sort of like this missile defense kind of game. In that we blended, orchestral with rock and metal sounds, but that was where, as your towers would get destroyed, the music would change from orchestral to become progressively more rock. And so in that we used a lot of electric guitar and electric bass, and really tried to do an authentic rock sound and then an authentic kind of metal sound for the final track. So we had some experience doing that, and Karl and our other brother Marty, they've been in bands and they play a lot of kind of rock and guitar music. So it's not like something that is completely unfamiliar. I think it's just what we may have been known for is writing really sort of pleasing, fun, upbeat, kind of swung Mario-esque kind of fun major key pieces. Not really anything rocking, but we love
Mario isn't really known
stuff.
for his shredding.
Yeah. Or funky R&B, Sonic-y stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
neither of which have a lot of guitar, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was happy to hear it. It was kind of fun. It got me to perk up a little bit. So, kind of speaking of that was one of my personal highlights of the album and of the song as well. But is there like a favorite moment or like melody or technique that you guys were really proud of that you were able to sneak in here?
Why don't we each take a turn? Karl, what's your thing?
For me, I think it probably makes sense to talk about the other person's contributions. For me, my favorite part in this of Will's melody is the part that... And then there's that other voice that kind of descends. It's just a really pretty use of harmony. And it's just kind of that thing where I think it's a really beautiful melody, but it also feels vast and kind of evokes like the epicness of space. But it also rocks too. And I also really enjoyed how my initial riff, that really kind of fast, shreddy thing, Will really contrasted that with his melody. He didn't try to I was expecting he would kind of take that momentum and run with it, but he really just did something completely different, which I love.
Well, thanks, man. That's great to hear. Yeah, it's fun revisiting some of this music. I think if we're talking about each other, I think I tend to agree with Karl as far as like the melody moments. This track, the reason why we picked it is I was just really happy. I felt the elements came together where everything felt organic, and I felt like the melody really did have sort of an independence, and the chords felt inevitable. Everything worked together. I think my favorite stuff from Karl is just all the grooves that he came up with, particularly on the main menu theme. It's just really satisfying, and I think it led me to come up with like a melody that I wouldn't have. One of my favorite moments from him is in the stage 2 theme. He actually wrote this intro riff that I love that goes dun, da 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 da, and it was so good that when I had to write a melody to the song, I couldn't stop playing his riff because it felt so satisfying to me melodically that I really had to go in a completely different direction in order to come up with a melody.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, I think I wasn't asked, Stephen, but I think one of my personal moments from this song is that bass line is fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe...
Yeah, it's so active. I love active bass lines like that.
Yeah, and I believe in this track, that's actually an Amiga sample bass.
cool.
So for the bass, that was another fun thing where every track it's kind of all over the place. Most tracks it is always some sort of retro sound, but yeah, this bass on this track is an Amiga sample.
Interesting.
I
I can see that too.
In hindsight, I really should have figured out how you guys divvied up the duties on the song. Like, it makes so much sense. They're so separate and so individually you. But kind of as a whole, I was thinking about this kind of as a stage, as a level. And did you guys kind of decide ahead of time what tone you were going for? Because, like, this is the first stage of the game. It's kind of setting the...
Again, it's sad because this game will never be released, but there was a lot of thought about that, and there was a lot of talk between us and the developer. One of the things that was going to happen is this first stage was supposed to be, like, incredibly epic and super intense because it was actually going to be a dream, where at the end of the stage, it turns out that was actually just in an arcade, and it's, like, the main character. That wasn't real. Oh. And then the second stage was when it actually turns real, and the aliens invade.
Way more like intense and epic in the tone of each one, where this one was supposed to feel really more soaring and like a dream, and that's why I think just all the elements of it really worked out. Like,
Gotcha.
I don't know, it just kind of has that quality where the next ones really kind of get more rocking and intense.
Mm-hmm. That definitely
it seems like it very much just that first stage thing for me, where it's like drawing you in and getting you pumped up. It's stuff that I think like Shovel Knight got down with Strike the Earth, and that a lot of old games were really good at. That first stage is so important to like hook the listener on the music.
Right, I agree.
And this definitely helps me. So.
But I think the other thing that was kind of fun is he kind of gave us some freedom of coming up with like level ideas and coming up with like things in the song where he had specific ideas for it, but then when we would come up with musical things, he kind of would let us, come up with a few stage themes ahead. And he said, I'll be inspired by your music to sort of design some of these levels, because some of those aspects weren't created yet. He must not have been very inspired because the game did fall through.
He just got too distracted listening to the music. Never finished it.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I've got the soundtrack. I can just chill out to this. So speaking of inspiration, I guess kind of last question, were there any like other games or musical inspirations that you guys were drawing from?
I know mine. Karl, do you...
Yeah, Will, you can start with yours.
Mine was definitely the Gradius games, and also Life Force, or I think it's called like Salamander, on the arcade version. We had played tracks from Gradius 3 and Salamander like on a recent episode of the podcast, and we were talking about how incredible it is that melody can really capture the feeling of flight with some of kind of its higher leaps, or just the quality of it. It really does feel like soaring. It feels like flight. And so there wasn't really any specific melodic moments, but definitely when I was writing the melody to this first theme, I knew I really want to capture that effect, because this is the same type of game and we really want to make it soar. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons we named it Soaring Through the Stars, is just because we did try to go for that kind of effect.
Yeah, for me, obviously, since I was doing a lot more of the FM kind of 16-bit sounding stuff, the Genesis was really the name of the game. And that's one of the things he said, too, is he specifically cited Thunder Force 4 specifically. So that was a soundtrack I listened to a lot, particularly the track, for me, Don't Go Off, which is the course select from Thunder Force 4. That is almost like eerily similar to the main menu theme that we ended up going with for the project. So a lot of influence from that track specifically. But in general, a lot of like really kind of solid Genesis funky music was very influential to me. As well as
influences were actually 8-bit influences, and your influences were 16-bit influences, and that they were able to work together. I think that's kind of cool. Yeah,
and there was actually, for me, one of the most striking influences was this arcade game called Battle Garega, which was composed by Manabu Namiki, which is an arcade game in like mid-90s. And there's this track called Fly to the Laden Sky, which was, not surprisingly, stage 1 of that game. And so that opening riff that I wrote was definitely inspired by that track. So that was another influence for me.
It sounds like you guys knew the tone, you knew the feeling and the style of game you were going for. And you were able to jump into it with a pretty rad collaboration. I really liked how it came out.
Well, thank you.
All right, well, that should about wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for coming on here.
Thank you.
Absolutely, our pleasure.
Oh, of course.
And where do you want people to find you out there on the internet?
SuperMarcatoBrothers.com is where you can find our website, and that has our podcast, our original music. It has a bio and everything. That's sort of our main website. And if you're specifically looking for the music that we've composed, you can find it at our website, but you can also find it at music.supermarcatobrothers.com.
Fantastic. And yeah, that's all. Is that still pay what you want?
Yeah,
it is.
It is.
Nice. So, like you said, Will, you can pay $100 for an album if you want. So, go ahead.
No one's stopping you, folks.
No dollars for it.
Yeah, exactly. Anywhere you want.
Mix it up. Surprise them.
Totally.
Well, thanks again, Will and Karl. It was a pleasure as always.
Thanks
And
for having us.
I have no doubt that we will find a way to get you back on the show sometime soon.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. See you guys later.
Take care.
You've been listening to a segment from the OverClocked PodCast, the official podcast of OCRemix.org. If you'd like to hear more, check out the rest of the channel, or get the full episodes from iTunes or your podcast provider of choice. And for more video game music and remixes, check out OCRemix.org.